Well, hello everyone. This is Dawn Stevens, and want to welcome you to this webinar on the trend survey that we just recently completed. And I also want to introduce my co-panelist, Mark Gross.
Hey, hello everybody out there. Thank you for joining us. This is the 5th year we've been running this trend survey. And I think it's really been very interesting watching what's been happening in industry trends as we're going along. For the first 4 years of this, Joanne Hackos has been my partner in crime. This year I'm delighted to introduce Dawn Stevens, who's the new President Director of Comtech Services, CIDM, as my new partner in crime. This is and every year we've been trying to keep the questions similar so we can do comparables, and we've been largely successful. We're trying to get information on content and how people are viewing content and the different content formats and how that's been changing, sort of like delivery mechanisms and what people are thinking about as they're looking out into the future. We've had over 1,900 respondents over 5 years, and we've been averaging about 375 people every year, and I think we've gathered some great information over time, and I think the trends. I think there's some interesting results this year that some are what we expected, and some are very surprising. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Dawn.
All right, thank you, Mark. So let's just start. As Mark said, we've had about 375 participants, and let's just take a look at exactly the types of people that we have. So I guess the specific number is 368, and you can see here the breakdown of who participated. Really, about half of the people who are responding in the survey classify themselves as writers. And really, I think you see that the largest groups of people responding are the people that we would largely consider the traditional roles of information development, the writers, the managers, the information architects, and so forth, with only a small percentage of people in maybe some of the other support roles. You'll also notice if you add all the numbers up of the percentages, it adds up to more than 100%, in fact, really over 200%, which probably indicates here that most people do hold at least a couple of roles within their organization, that we're all wearing multiple hats, and that's actually going to be something we want to take a look at more this year, looking at the number of hats people wear, how their responsibilities and so forth vary within their organization. So we will actually be doing another survey later this year looking at organizational structure, so you can look for information on that later. From an industry perspective, we have by far, again, the largest number of people are classify themselves as coming from the technology side of things, and those were organizations that we gave subcategories, and so those are people from software, hardware, semiconductor, telecommunications kinds of companies, those types of things. And if you actually looked at that number broken down even further, we saw that about 44% of all respondents said that they were coming from the software side of things. And then you can see, it dramatically drops off after that technology side of things. So we're definitely reaching that group of people. There's probably certainly, as you look at these results, a bias towards the technology and software side of things. I think there's still good trends for people in some of the other industries, but do want to point out there's probably a little bit of a bias towards the software. So that's who participated. Let's take a look first. The survey is really broken into what are you doing now and what do you plan to do in the future. So let's take a look at the current state of affairs. So we asked the question of what types of content are you creating? And really what we've seen over the last 5 years is this isn't really changing. The larger percentages have stayed the same. They're representing the kind of core of the existence of information development in terms of things like user manuals, release notes, and help systems. And that hasn't changed. I don't know that any of us actually expect that to change when we're really polling information developers. So we've really consistently seen the user manual side of things for all kinds of users, whether we're talking about end users, administrators, installers, maintainers, anything geared towards those types of users fall into that. That's our most significant work. Most of us are doing that. Help systems are running in the about half of us, a little more than half of us are doing that, and then it's interesting to see that about a third of the people are reporting that they also do training, and again that hasn't changed either. So we do see that there's some combination groups where people are doing both documentation and training. Last year we added knowledge base to the mix. We see from last year to this year it stayed the same. People reporting about 30% saying that they have a responsibility for the knowledge bases. And then this year, we've added the social media and marketing categories. So we're starting to hear more and more teams saying that they're being asked to do this type of work. We see those are the lower end here, the 12, 19%. It'll be interesting to see as the years go on how those percentages might start to change as we're hearing at least that there's a trend moving in that direction. So we're creating all of this content. How are we doing it? We asked about the overall authoring tools. So you can see by far, we've got two front runners here. We have taking over the lead here is some kind of an XML author tool, whether that is Oxygen, XMetal, Arbortext, any of those authoring tools. About 2/3 of people are producing content, of at least some of their content, using an XML authoring tool. And then we still have about half of us, or a little more than half, 56%, still working with Microsoft Word at some level. Keep in mind, this is a composite score of any tools that anybody said they are using. So again, you see the numbers adding up to more than 100%. We're seeing that people use a combination of tools, but again, by far, we're either still kind of back in the sticking with the old standbys of Microsoft Word, or moving into some of the more current authoring, XML authoring tools. But you can see the further breakdown as we go down the list. An interesting trend to start to watch will be things like at the bottom of the list there, the markdown, where again we're starting to hear people going more and more to that type of tool in order to communicate their information. Now within these tools, we asked also the question of which of these is your primary tool. So the previous slide was that composite of any tool that you're using versus this slide is actually telling us which one is the one that is the primary method for creating content. And here we see definitely a trend going towards more and more people are using an XML author as their primary tool over the second popular tool of Word. It's still not a majority, but it is certainly the largest piece of the pie. So about the trend is basically that we're about 3 times more likely to be using an XML authoring tool over anything else. I also wanted to just point out a couple of examples here where we look at kind of the spread between what are we using in terms of primary and secondary and tertiary. What this is showing you in this, the first graph, the XML authoring one, for example, is that basically it's saying if you're using an XML authoring editor, you are almost certainly using it as your primary tool. We see that high 86% are saying it, if they're using it, it's their primary tool, with very small scores on the secondary and tertiary. In contrast to things like Word or Markdown, where you see that the graphics are actually more level, and in fact actually what you're seeing here is that Markdown is actually more likely to be a secondary tool. Word is more likely to be a secondary tool than a primary tool. So to a certain extent, I see that as good news in that the XML, if you're using it, it is that primary tool. Word is not likely to be the primary tool, even though most of us are using it. It's much more likely to be something that's just kind of in our back pocket that we do some work with, but isn't our focus anymore. We also asked about content management. It shouldn't be a surprise that when so many people are saying that they're using XML authoring tools, we would expect probably that people are using, they're handling more files than they used to with a topic-based system, and so we would expect to see that people are reporting that they're using a component content management system or a content management system. So we see kind of between those two that we are at about half of that. That may be surprising in that means that really half the people using an XML authoring tool are still doing it in some kind of a file server or some kind of source control system. So it might be something to take a look at again from a trend to see if there's a correspondence to the number of topics being managed, if there's some kind of a break point where people say, oh, I've got to get to a content management system. So it may be something that we want to look at in the future, because I think we see as you start to manage tens of thousands of topics is the trend where you end up going to a content management system, and we have no data right now to see how this tracks toward how many topics are you creating, and are you therefore in a content management system. So something that I think I would like to look at in the future. We do see on this that between the content management systems and the source control, 3/4 of the people are likely to have some kind of source control in place, at least managing different versions and so forth of their content as they move forward. Then I wanted to take this interesting look. After we talk about what kind of content we've created, the tools we're creating, the question was, how have we published our content? And in this particular case, I wanted to go back to the beginning of these surveys and see if we see any trends here, because we do ask a lot of questions about not so much what do you expect to be writing, we expect to still be doing manuals and so forth, but more about how do you expect the way you publish this content is going to change. And so what we see here to start with is I just want to show you the trends from the last from the beginning, from 2013 through 2015, because the questions that we ask in the survey are, what do you anticipate you're going to be doing in the next 3 years? So here we are 5 years out from 2013, and I wanted to just say, look at our expectations here. Our expectations may not have changed. The lines kind of are somewhat the same here in terms of we expect to be doing less print, more electronic PDFs, more HTML, and so forth. But we're going to take a look at the next slide of what the actuals have been. So our expectations are staying the same. The biggest differences that we're seeing really are here in the social media, video and social media areas, where we're seeing people reporting expectations just continuing to grow, saying, yep, we really expect that a lot more of our content is going to be published as video or in some kind of a social aspect. So we're anticipating this kind of change, but let's take a look at what people are actually reporting in terms of publishing. So I've kept the grayed out the expectations from the previous years, and the red now is what are people reporting as their actuals. So we can see at the top, we're pretty good at estimating the stuff that we know fairly well and that we're doing all the time. We see this continuing trend that print is decreasing. I'm not sure what happened in 2015 with that expectation being so high, but we can see that from the 2013 and 2014 projections. We're really right on line, in fact, maybe even decreasing at a little bit faster level than we expected. In terms of the electronic PDF, the HTML websites, the help, we're pretty much tracking exactly what we would expect. But look at these bottom formats, like what I had pointed out on the previous slide, the video and the social aspects, where we really anticipate these growing by leaps and bounds, and what we're seeing in actuality maybe is a lot less than what we expected. Video and social are meeting our 2013 expectations. That's, you know, 5 surveys ago, 4 years down the line, not the 2 to 3 that the prediction was made for. So while we see these things on the horizon, maybe they're not coming to reality quite as fast as we have been anticipating. But I think we're starting to see that reality, because let's take a look here at now what are we predicting for 2020, that is 3 years out. What did everybody say were their expectations? And you can see while we kind of stay again consistent with where we are in the top lines, we do see that we've backed off our expectations some in terms of things like video and social, that we're recognizing that some of those formats maybe didn't take off as quickly as we expected. We're backing off on ebooks, we're backing off on mobile applications, video, social. So yes, we expect to see some growth there, but maybe not quite as dramatic as we were predicting in the years past. We still are predicting that decrease in print, but for the first time we're starting to predict maybe a more dramatic demise of just the PDF file too. We see, I mean, it's still at 60% still predicting that they're going to produce in that, but it is a decline over what we've seen in the past.
Yeah, Dawn, before you leave this slide, I think this is a really interesting slide actually, and on what expectations are. And I think part of it, what's really interesting is, first of all, print is actually reduced a lot more than expectations would be, and the future expectations for lower. And I think that's what we are seeing in the industry. So and so there is a big movement in the kind of materials that this audience is using. The other thing I think is that things like video, the expectations have probably, they've reined them in, but they may have reined them in a little too much, because I think just how difficult it's been. But because as you've seen, some later customers are expecting video, and they want it, and social, and so I think it's interesting. There's been like a backlash to bring it back down, but you know, it may have been just more because people are just reacting to, oh, it hasn't gone that quickly, so I'll bring it down. So I think it's really going to be interesting what happens with this next year.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to dig a little bit more into some of the things like mobile and social. In these next few slides, we asked some very specific questions about that. So, you know, what we just saw is that people are still saying we expect mobile applications to still grow, in fact, really triple over the next 3 years. So we asked some questions about what the overall mobile strategy is. And first of all, it's interesting to me because we kind of saw a disagreement in the way that people answered questions. So what you see in this screen, where it's talking about strategy, and the the purple is we do not publish to mobile. Okay, that's 45%, implying that 55% do, but in the previous slide, we were showing numbers that were barely over 10% saying that they had done some mobile. So differences in the way the question is phrased and the overall corporate strategy versus specifically what you're doing within documentation, I think it accounts for this difference. And also the difference between having a mobile strategy and mobile application strategy. So having content that is responsive and available and viewed on a mobile still may just be publishing to a website that has some kind of a mobile awareness versus actually creating a specific app. So we also might see that's one of the reasons for the difference. But what we're seeing in terms of strategy, certainly if you're going to have a mobile strategy, we see that people are saying, yes, we are aware, need to do responsive design, and we are designing for the web, designing our websites to at least be responsive, in many cases designing specifically for mobile in the first place. And then in the amount of content, we see that largely, though, we might design for a web or for a mobile view, but in terms of the content that we're producing, it's exactly the same, whether it's going to be to a regular website or to the mobile. The vast majority of people are saying we're publishing the same amount of content to each location. Some people are recognizing that maybe all of their content isn't appropriate for a mobile device, so we see a smaller percentage, 29%, reducing the amount of content, and interesting, a very small percentage saying they actually produce more content for their mobile devices than for the website.
And I'm thinking that I mean, there's been such a big movement towards mobile. I think you know, the responsive design kind of things become so much easier that people are seeing that as a way of producing material for mobile. I mean, there's some small group that's saying, I'm only going to go out to mobile because that's where people are looking. But I think there might be confusion on what responsive design has just gotten easier to do. So people may just be seeing that as an easier alternative to specific mobile. That's sort of my thinking on this.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so let's take also a look at the social strategy. Okay, we're expecting a growth in that. So taking a look here of what we've got, and again, we see a somewhat of disconnect about the use of social, but again, I think this is the social media strategy for the corporation. And so we see here that, well, we have 45% saying we don't use social. That doesn't match really the number from previous. But what we do see is that some of this social activity is largely still in the venue of marketing and pre-sales activities, and so maybe the information developers are not actively involved in here. But beyond you know, just pushing content to the users, like announcing new content releases, directing users to the content that we see here, I think it's also interesting to see that we are starting to explore the use of social media to be a feedback channel for our users so that we can gather information with 17%, 15% reporting the use of social media to gather that type of information. And so frequently information development reports that they're not able to have direct access to their users to ask questions, to find out, you know, what do they think about the content, what should they be doing differently, and so forth. I think social media is really starting to open the door for people to gather this information without maybe having the, you know, face-to-face or interview time with users. It's a new way to be able to get some real information, and I think we're going to see these numbers starting to increase. And then just quickly from the social media platform perspective, obviously social media may take many forms. We're not seeing any kind of trending favorite. Each seems to have, about an equal, be equally likely to be used. I imagine the slight edge to something like YouTube is because of the video usage that is there, and of course the LinkedIn being maybe the more professional venue to present content in versus something like Facebook.
Yeah, and I think it's clear over here, like the YouTube number is so high over here where that's not reflected in too much of what we've seen so far. And I think this is starting to reflect some unofficial channels that that they don't think of when they're developing them, but are out there. Because I think there's a lot of YouTube that sort of gets distributed out there, and blogs that are out that are unofficial. So I think there's a lot, and I think I know in my personal work I do, I'm more and more dependent on finding that kind of information. So I think this might be reflecting that, where it's not thought of when they're developing content. It's just a thought when I saw this.
Mm-hmm. Then we also asked a question from more of that social side of things of, what about user-generated content? Can users create their own content and add it to the mix? And what we're seeing, is that this is still largely avoided. Customers are not able to contribute content, and certainly even if they are, we're greatly restricting what can be done. They can add comments only to existing content, or their comments have to be curated before anybody else can see them. Very, very few percentage of people are really letting anybody do something that they're not monitoring, which is of course a very smart thing. I expect that the reason for the nope, customers can't contribute content still largely centers around control and legal concerns. And I think these are issues that are being addressed and will need to continue to be addressed moving forward if we want to make full use of the power of social media. If we want to really create communities of users, we're going to need to solve some of these issues. And I hear it frequently at many of the conferences that I'm attending, that this is a puzzle that people are trying to figure out, of how do we satisfy legal and yet still give our customers the opportunity to talk to each other or contribute additional information to what maybe the technical writers created in the first place. So that's the trends, or the current state of affairs. So now we want to take a look at, what are we now predicting? We saw a little bit of that prediction in that one set of slides on formats, but let's take a look at more of those details in terms of what you think the next 3 years are going to bring us. First of all, we wanted to see what's driving the expectations. When we ask about how do you expect to publish, what kind of content do you expect to publish, and so forth, we wanted to take a look at those customer demands and see what is really what you're being asked for. So, so I don't think it's really surprising to see that users want to find relevant information for their situation immediately. So we see a lot of things like the content that is searchable, content that is personalized, content that's topic-based, customizable, and so forth. These are all things that are really geared towards that, meeting that need of users want that relevant information when they want it. We are seeing the increasing demands for more than just that static text format, but things like videos and interactive media, animations, and so forth, all starting to show up on the graphs with some level of percentage. Customers want their content to be on the go. They want them to be viewable on their mobile devices. An interesting thing to keep our eye on, though, is that we've got 43% reporting that customers are still demanding PDF. It doesn't seem to fit even with the rest of the demands here, it doesn't necessarily make sense when we think about preferences for topic-based content and finding just the one little piece of information that applies. So I think it's something that probably warrants a closer look. What is the real need behind this request for PDF? Is it that that's just what they're familiar with? Is it that is there some solution maybe other than PDF that will actually meet the need, and we just need to educate the customers for it? I think it's interesting to me. I've had many conversations where we as information developers really do want to get the PDF off the table and do some of the more interesting formats that give us more capabilities to offer, interaction and video and things like that, and yet we are still faced with this reality that there's a certain percentage of our customers demanding PDF.
And before we leave this slide, I think it's a really interesting slide, because I think it shows, first of all, a few disconnects between what people's plans are, as we saw in the previous slides, and what customers are demanding. So, and first of all, 45% are asking for video, where we saw the numbers before are much lower. I think there is a movement towards people looking at video more and more, and it's sort of like not catching up there. I think that's going to be something to keep an eye out. A thought on the PDFs, and it's been pretty, it's been stubbornly out there for a long time, and I'm thinking it has to do with there's so much data out there, and it's so many different forms. Everybody's being creative on stuff, and I think PDFs is a sort of a more stable form that people are used to. It looks like a page, and people know what a page looks like, and you can print it out when you want to. And I think it gives a sense of stability in a world where there's so much more formats and more data and some. So I'm not sure it's going to go away that quickly. I think people are much more comfortable when they can get to that. Even if they've got a page that looks like something else, ultimately they might want to look like a page. So I think that's it's not going to go out that quickly. And there's one sleeper over here that's sort of opportunities to generate content themselves out there is at 18%, where we saw before that companies have been very timid about letting customers or whoever users are to put information in. And I would have liked to get, it's the first time I think I've seen it that way, but I'm wondering if this is really they want to generate their own content, or it's really just the ability to annotate, when they're looking at something and they're looking at complex material, whether they just want the ability to annotate their own copies, which is a little bit easier for a company to swallow, I think. And there may be some things over here that probably bear more investigation. I would put it into next year's survey. So I think it shows some disconnects over here with what people are doing, and it shows us where we may want to spend some more time and effort.
Yeah. So certainly, besides driving, the other aspect of driving our plans is, of course, the demands of the business. The good news is that the business wants us to pay attention to the customer demand, so we can pay attention to that first slide. That vast majority of the majority of people are saying that the customer demands and expectations are certainly part of their business considerations. But then, kind of equal to that is an interesting statement that people are reporting. Well, part of what is driving our predictions and so forth is an expectation that we keep up with the information development trends. Hence, why everybody's attending this, this webinar, I think, is say, okay, well, what do we need to be keeping up with? So I think it's interesting that our companies are expecting us to stay up with what's going on and keep up with the Joneses there. Some of the other things, do more with less. That one is something we're going to look at in some more detail as we continue through the rest of these slides, is that this demand is certainly a reality we're all facing if we want to make these changes, but we're going to see moving forward, the company wants us to keep up with these trends, but they want to do it on their current budget or less. So we're going to take a look at some of that here in the next few slides. This is just another from a content strategy. What do we expect our strategies to be going forward? So a lot of these are very similar to what we reported from a how do we expect to publish and so forth. So we see this focus on first and foremost the idea of improving our mobile device support. So we certainly have seen that the growth in mobile. We're predicting continued growth in mobile, and that of course focuses us on, from a content strategy, we need to be paying attention to how to improve content on our on mobile devices. It's interesting to me that that's not what the #1 customer concern was. And so when we think about these drivers, here we're reporting a strategy of let's improve our mobile device, but that's not necessarily what the customers are really asking for, nor does it really clearly map to a specific business requirement. But the rest of these strategies, the next several ones that after mobile, that the dynamic delivery system, restructuring content to be topic-based and so forth, those are then really related to, I think, more of what the customers were saying in terms of getting content that's geared specifically to their needs. And to do any of those things, we're going to probably need to change things like our authoring environment, which we see here in the middle of the strategies. And some of these other things like eliminating PDF, eliminating printing, we've seen those predictions coming forward. We're not maybe as in of a hurry to stop doing things as we are to say, oh, we need to improve some of the newer things. So we also asked, so those were the 3-year outlooks. We did say, just ask immediately, in the next year, what percentage of your content do you expect to be delivered electronically versus, the print? So really looking at how quickly is print declining and so forth. And you can see that we're expecting, 33% of companies are expecting that virtually all of their documentation will be delivered electronically rather than in print. And then it kind of goes down from there, but little bounces in the percentages. So we do see that there's our second highest actually is a very small amount. So we've got a third of the people saying all of it's going to be, close to all of it's going to be, and the next level is, well, not very much of it's going to be. So I don't know that there's a specific trend that we can say here that more and more people are going to be delivering their content electronically or not. I think we've kind of got both sides of the scale still being reported here pretty significantly.
Yeah, but I think it is significant that a third of the respondents say they're delivering everything electronically. I think that's an incredible number when you think about it. And really, if you look at it, about half is delivering at least 3/4 electronically. So
yes.
I think that's a shift from previous year. I haven't looked at the numbers on this, and but I think that's a shift. The idea of everything being electronic, I think, is sort of a trend, an ongoing trend.
Well, and certainly more people are delivering electronic content, but it's not necessarily going to be their only output, nor is it necessarily expected to be their only output.
Right. Although I hardly get any manuals anymore in anything I buy. So.
That's true. This is still kind of the same look here, or a different look at the same information. The decline in print and hard copy, and the start of a decline in PDFs. In fact, actually, this is just another view of the same content I showed in the previous section when we were looking at what are people currently doing versus predictions. This is the 2017 prediction of how we expect to be delivering content. So mostly through websites, electronic PDFs maybe delivered on those websites and so forth, still kind of consistently developing those help systems, but then down, significantly the printed hard copy. And as I pointed out before, things like the wiki pages and so forth are things to start taking a closer look at and see what kinds of trends might be happening. We saw the somewhat increase in Markdown as a tool, here as a delivery with wiki pages and so forth. We may start to see some growth there. Another view that may be a little bit confusing, so I'll take a little bit of an explanation here, but in terms of some of these publishing formats, we're asking a lot of different types of detail, basically saying what percentage of your content do you anticipate being delivered in each of these different types of publishing formats. And each circle in and of itself is 100%. So if we take a look at, for example, the XML circle, we're seeing that not quite 30% of people are saying if I'm using XML, it's for 90 to 100% of all my content, and so forth. That's how you interpret this. If we're looking across the board, though, then and trying to do a comparison, it's not reflecting per se that, oh, there's more people using HTML responsive than using XML. That's not how to interpret this. It's basically saying if I am doing responsive HTML, I'm very likely to be saying that the majority of my content is going to be responsive. What I think is interesting to take a look at is that the prediction of HTML, HTML responsive, XML, PDF, all in this 27-30% category of that most of our content is going to be in this format. So we're starting to see a change from what was today. We didn't show these circles, these exact same circles in this format in the what we're doing today. But if we did take a look at this, for example, the PDF circle today says 44% have their content, have 90 to 100% of their content in PDF, and we're taking a look at in the future that's going to drop, to less than 30%, while as these HTML categories currently are showing only about 15 to 20% in these categories in that high, as 100% of their content being delivered in those formats. So we're seeing the growth there. So a little confusing graph to try to interpret, but still I think interesting to see what percentage of this content is really being delivered. So here, for example, video, 55% are saying it represents only 1 to 25% of our content, so which is what we would expect. So from a mix here, we're still seeing that the largest factors in our mix are these things with the big purple, the XML, the PDF, the HTML.
And I think also, I mean, we're seeing this throughout, that ebooks have not, we're saying ebooks have not really caught on to the, everything's in an ebook. And I think, but I think what's happening is that ebook is a very specific electronic technology, but it sort of melds into some of these other things. So a PDF replaces an ebook in many cases, and responsive HTML can replace ebooks. I think that my account, we're not doing that much explicit ebooks, but we're doing things that really are ebooks in effect, but we don't think of them that way. That's a thought on that.
Yeah, I haven't really been, I've kind of been ignoring the ebook presence on the slide, so thanks for pointing that out. All right, so we see what the trends are of what we're expecting to do, so therefore let's just take a quick look at what we expect in terms of being able to get there. What are our implementation strategies? And I think probably to me, one of the most interesting slides in this whole deck is this one. Are you ready to make the changes that you're predicting you need to make in the next 3 years? And it's kind of it's an interesting number, and it's a scary number. That 50%, more than 50% are saying, nope, we're not ready for this change. Our content isn't ready. And this is really actually one of the most interesting changes in the survey year over year, and not for the better. What we have seen is that this number, the I don't know whether I'm ready or not number, has gone down. So people are actually starting to do that evaluation. They're able to say, am I ready to make this change? Am I not ready to make this change? And so only a small percentage say, I don't know, I haven't done the evaluation. But it's not a simple matter of everybody who did the evaluation said, nope, we're not ready, and so that the no's increased by the same amount that the don't knows decreased. Actually, the no percentage grew, which means that what we're seeing is that companies that responded yes earlier, yes, we are ready, are now actually saying, just kidding, we're not ready. Whether they're learning more and therefore saying, nope, we're not ready. Because over the last several years, companies responding, yes, we're ready, we're up in the mid-40s. 45% were saying, yep, we're ready. In all previous years, this is the first year we've seen that now companies are coming in and saying, no, we're not ready after all.
And I think that's a fascinating result over here, and I think there might be two things going on. One is, as people get closer, it does become like a uh-oh, but the other thing that's going on, I think, is that the bar is constantly raised on what you need to do to get content ready to be all electronic and for this kind of distribution. So if you're not moving along and doing something on it, the gap of where you have to get to is probably getting larger and larger, and moving very quickly. So I think there's some of that going on, just like a fear factor because of that bar constantly raising. It reminds me of a book I was reading when I was in school, Future Shock. That sort of dates me. They talked about how when things change, there's a lot of psychological effects that go on, and so part of it is getting your hands around it. But if you don't, I mean, it just seems harder and harder as you go along. And I'm wondering how much of that is going on here. This is a fascinating result of this survey.
Yeah, it is. So why aren't we ready? We asked about shortcomings, and largely the reasons that people are saying they aren't ready center around the amount of content that they're producing, the structure, its effectivity, its format, and its findability. So basically they're finding that they're probably producing too much content, so the needed information is difficult to find, and in some cases they're even questioning whether the actual information that people need are actually even being supported. So we're kind of really, to summarize all of the different pieces of this puzzle in terms of shortcomings, it just seems that people are feeling the need to overhaul their content strategies and structures. So then what are their barriers? Here's our shortcomings. How do we improve these barriers? How do we come up with a better structure and so forth? The barriers here I guess what we would really expect, and what we've seen over and over again is, yep, we recognize we have a problem, we know we need to do something, but we don't have enough time and we don't have enough budget. Being, two of the biggest aspects. It's that age-old battle of not having enough resources to do something different. We have to continue to produce content. We can't just stop everything and re-strategize and start over. We have to still be meeting the current needs of our customers in some way. So that the balance of resources, the balance of budget remain at the top of the list of barriers. I think many of the barriers that are lower on the list, such as, well, we don't really know what the user demands are, or we don't know how to do something, or we don't have the right tools, those are certainly going to be more addressable if the first two are not in the way. If we're given time, if we're given budget, we can address these other barriers.
And I think actually the third one also is related to the first two, because I think there's I mean, if the content is not designed or written appropriately, if that's that's what people are thinking, then that means they just got to rewrite everything before they can move forward, and that becomes a huge, overwhelming thing that fits into the rest. And I think the three of them are connected. And if they could go and go back and look at their content more critically and see if maybe a lot of it or some of it can be used the way it is, or is a simpler way of handling it, that might take care of some of that insufficient budget, insufficient time. But I think from a distance it looks like, oh, you got to do all this before you can move forward. And that's part of, I think, the fear factor that's going on. And I think that's why those three are related in many ways.
Yep. And so, it's not surprising to see basically a 1-to-1 mapping when we say, well, what do you need? That basically people need more time and more money. So we see that that's really just a 1-to-1 mapping to the barriers. They need the time and money to address basically anything else that's on the list, to get better training, to get better tools, and so forth. But to get those items, to be able to go back to get the people, to get the money and to get the time, they also are recognizing here in what we see in this survey that there's a need for that compelling story, for having supporting analytics that validate what they're saying they need to do, to be able to get the buy-in from their staff and their management. So there's a big need for success stories, for ROI, and other data from maybe leaders in the community to really help the rest of the community justify taking these similar steps. And we did ask specifically then about, well, when you think about your current content, if you've gotten past those initial barriers and you're now working on the conversions to these new formats and taking the steps to move to what you've predicted, what are your overall strategies that you're taking? So the majority of people are working to do those conversions on your own with some supplemental training to support them. I think that is kind of what you were saying, Mark, is that largely this seems to be driven by this need to rewrite much of the content for the new strategies. So there's less strategy being reflected here of any kind of automated conversion to being done, and a feeling that the content version can't be outsourced because they couldn't outsource the ability to rewrite that content. They need to have the expertise about their product in order to be able to rewrite it.
And of course, it's somewhat self-serving, but I'm always amazed at how much people distrust. In my experience, a lot of it can be automated, but yet when it's looked on and we prepare budget and you're trying to lay out your plans, it ranks so low on the plans. And if it was just ranked higher, it probably could help with a lot of the rest of the budgeting efforts. That's, of course, a personal opinion.
Yep. Well, and we see that here, that the challenges, are basically exactly what you were talking about, because they perceive their content's not well structured. That's their number one challenge that they see in conversion. then again, we still see the cost and the budget as being an overall challenge.
And those three keep on going together as we went through
Mm-hmm.
everything we were looking at, not structured, insufficiency, the lack of budget, are all really sort of interconnected.
Yeah, and I think it also, not only, as you were talking about, having people take a look and see is there really any content that they could convert, but there's also that even as you try to make your business case, changing the way you write now, even in an old system, could still have a positive impact once you get the go-ahead, because the conversion might be easier at that point then. Okay, so that is the data. I know we went pretty long in our conversation, so I don't know that there's a lot of time for questions, but we're ready to ask any questions. Despite the trend to go it alone, I think that most companies in their conversions will tell you that having consultants will help you along the way, and so both, I think DCL and Comtech and CDM are here to help you in whatever ways that you'd like. And we're happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you, Dawn. Thank you, Mark. This has been a very informative webinar. We have a couple of questions that has come in. The first being, what findings most surprised you in the survey?
Well, definitely the trend that people are saying we're not as ready as we thought we were. I think that was, to me, was the most surprising thing. And then I think second to that for me was how people have started to cut back on some of the things that were trending as predictions in the future, the video, the social, and so forth, that were consistently growing in terms of predictions that, yes, we're going to be using these, did get scaled back quite a bit this year. Mark?
And those were very much, I think those are the top things that I saw also. Although the other thing that I saw is just how it would get to, in terms of how plans and conversion, how little of it was planned to be automated conversion. I was surprised by that. And I think that's just a matter of people may have had bad experiences 5-10 years ago and still think in terms of the same tools and technology. All the things have changed dramatically over the last 3 years. That was a surprising finding to me.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, thank you. The last question that has come in is, what content strategies do you think will continue to grow this year and next year based on the trends results?
I think that from a content strategy perspective, I absolutely still expect a concentration on mobile strategies, whether that is working to make sure that content is responsive and attractive and readable and usable on people's mobile devices, or whether that is actually starting to take a look at designing specifically for mobile and writing specifically for mobile, because really when you think about the screen space and things like that, we know that it's different from writing to print to writing to web pages. I think it's just as different writing for web pages than writing for a smaller handheld device as well. So I think we'll see a lot of attention in the mobile area.
I think video will start becoming a larger piece of the strategy, even though it didn't show up that much over here. But we did see some of that, but and certainly from the demand side, I think video will become a pretty important part of all this.
Yeah, I agree. I think, with YouTube and so forth, we've learned, 20 years ago, we never considered video because it was going to be so expensive to create it, and at the quality that we imagined it needed to be had. We were imagining we need to have quality like a major motion picture, and with YouTube and all the different qualities that are out there, and yet still people go to it to learn how to repair their washing machine or things like that. I think we've learned that there's a greater tolerance for that, and we can produce video much less expensively than we thought.
Great. Well, thank you, Dawn. And
I think we're out of time. I just wanted to thank Dawn for her insight. I mean, Dawn did all the heavy lifting in this presentation and did a great job with a lot of tremendous insights. And I thought, she did a great job. So thank you, Dawn. And I hope everybody found this to be a very useful webinar. There's a lot of good information here.
Thank you. And certainly credit where credit is due. I want to thank DCL for really putting all those graphics together. They took all the data and made some lovely graphics for the slides. So I think it was a great partnership for this webinar.
Great. Well, thank you, Dawn, and thank you, Mark, and thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar. This will conclude today's broadcast. You'll be able to access the recorded version of this webinar in the archive section of our website located at www.dclab.com. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.